This episode of Love Lauren is sponsored by Scott Bonnar Fabrication and Parts. So what we've got left of this machine is this bottom drum, this rear drum. Spin it around here. What we've got here is the bearing housing. There's the bearing sitting on the shaft itself. And then back behind it there's the drum clamp, the shaft clamp, sorry. So that bearing just sort of sits, these things are quite soft, so you do need to be careful with them, but that bearing basically just sits in that housing. The housing itself, you can see the slotted holes on that are what clamp into the side of the machine. On the other side you'll notice they're a little bit different, so this one's got the 2 elongated holes and the 1 regular hole. On the other side there's just the 3 regular circular holes. So these elongated slots allow you to adjust the position of the roller up or down in relation to the sole plate of the machine to make sure that everything's that you're getting a level cut basically. So you need to make sure they go back on in the right order. So that's actually come off nice and easily. These drum bearings, you just see how that sits in there. It's a sort of a pressed tin sort of thing, I think, or an alloy or something. It's not very sturdy, so look after these things. These drum bearings are not cheap. I think they're about $80 or so each, or for a set, I can't remember. So if you want to save a bit of cost, you can think about hanging on to them and just giving them a clean up. This one looks pretty old, but we'll see. So with that housing out of the way, we can now get access to this clamp in here. There's a little couple bits and pieces to this. There's the little nut that locks down against the clamp itself, and then there's this guy up here. For this top guy, I've got an 8mm open-ended spanner that I find fits quite nicely around there. You can also use a pair of vice grips or something else. For this bottom one, it's not a 1/2 inch, oddly enough, but my 14-inch fits around there, so I'm going to use it. Just loosen it back. Of course, a little bit of penetrating oil goes a long way on these bits if you need it. So I'm just going to loosen off like that. Not sure if it's set correctly on this machine, but on this shaft, but that bolt normally bears up against a little level section on this shaft, so we'll have a look at it when it comes out. It looks like it's sitting a little bit high to my mind, but it's on there, so we shall see. Give it a bit of a squirt. And we'll let that soak in while we do the other side. So this is our drive side bearing housing. You can see it's got the three regular holes rather than the elongated version. So that's actually just going to come right off of there. Let's see how happy that bearing's going to be about popping out. Looks like it's in there pretty well for now, so we'll come back to that. Bit of swoosh. And again, we'll loosen off that bottom nut. Just like so. Doesn't need to come all the way back, just enough to come out of there, and then we'll take that bolt back. These are square-headed bolts, so they're a little bit different to to what we're used to. That's fine like that. And I'm just using the bolt itself to give me a little bit of leverage to try wiggling that off the shaft. Just got some degreaser on there to try and clean up some of the gunk around there before I move this thing any further. It's pretty dirty. This is just slipped on here, so I'm not unscrewing it or anything. Just taking off. There's just a bit of muck back there. So same thing on this back side. Just let that penetrating oil work in. Wiped off some of the crud and whatnot on the shaft itself. And this feels like it's gonna hopefully pop right off of there. There we go. So again, if you can see in there, that's our shaft clamp, and that applies pressure just on the flat of that shaft there. It shouldn't be, when you put it back on, just make sure you're aligned to that flat. You don't want it anywhere else. And so with those two clamps off, we can start pulling the halves off that shaft. A little bit of wiggle. There's the first one. See inside there, looks too bad. This half is abnormally heavy as well. It looks like there's a bit of something extra inside of there. Not sure if that's normal on the 14. I think it is. I think the 14s have an extra counterweight or something to adjust for the weight of the engine on one side. You can see there's the two extra bolts holding that little bit inside and together. So I usually use those holes to knock off this section, so we'll see how that's going to work this time around. Let's have a look inside this roller half over here. You can see the 3 poles that sit in this pole holder, which sits on the shaft itself. It's held in place with a key. I didn't have any luck getting it off the twin. It was stuck on there pretty well, so we'll see what happens with this one. But there's these 3 poles. There's a little dimple on this side that sits on the inside, towards the inside of the pole holder itself. And they sort of flap around here, depending on whether you're rolling forwards or backwards. They sort of engage with the inside of the roller. So when the 2 roller halves are together, those poles will engage like so with these little notches or dimples on the half of the roller to prevent the roller moving forwards or backwards depending on which direction you're traveling. So we'll pull the rest of them out, tuck them aside. There's 3 more on the other side. Just going to try and get this other half off. It's not moving quite as readily, so I've got my hammer and a block of wood for the end of this shaft. I think that's come out now. There we go. And there's our 3 poles. On this roller, you can see there's a little bronze or brass bushing in the roller shaft. So I've just switched over to a 3/8 socket to get these 3 bolts out of here. prepped it with a bit of 3-in-1 just to make life a little bit easier. It is possible to break these screws, so you do want to be careful with them. You can replace them, but still want to be careful because you don't want to end up with one of them in there. So you can see this entire plate is screwed onto the drum itself, and it should just lift out. It's probably pretty well rusted on there, so throw some oil around there and let that sit while we do the other one. Let it soak in. On this roller there's also a counterweight in there, so I've got my 1/2-inch socket on there. It seems to be bolted into place. Let's see if we can shift it. It's pretty tight. Try this one. That one's gonna move. That oil's soaked in. Turn that over for now because I don't want that thing to completely go clunk. Ideally, I'd take the front cap off of this thing. Before trying to take this apart, but it's going to probably be stuck in place, so I need to get a poker in these holes to get that apart. Get ready for the clank. There we go. Alright, so I wanted to get this inside section out of this roller so I can clean up the inside of it. Taking out the 3 screws that hold that in place. I'm not sure if you can really see it, but there's a bit of light coming through between the inner lip of this roller and this bit that inserts into it. So that crack was pretty marginal, and it's just starting to develop between the 2 sections there. And I've accomplished that using these 2 large holes back here. Initially with my wooden dowel. It just goes down in there like so. Notice I'm angling it. I'm trying to target my efforts towards the center section as much as possible of this insert bit. There's a PVC pipe that sits in there just to keep the shaft itself clean, so I don't want to damage that, but most importantly I don't want to damage these sections of the roller itself. They will break, so we just need to be very careful with them. Now in my case, I found I wasn't having any luck with my dowel. So what I did, turn this over, just propped it up on a couple blocks of wood, and I used Glenn Russell's trick. Stuck that driver in just up against the middle as far as it would go again, and gave it a couple taps with the hammer just to really break that seal. I've also hit this outer edge with some WD-40 with some penetrating oil, and with some Ranex as well, just letting it run around and soak in. Once that crack started to develop, as I made some progress, I threw some extra WD-40 in there just to really get it going. So now that's on its way, we should be able to give it a few little final whacks and be done with it. Just have to go easy with it, nice and gentle. And take your time, and it will come out. So that's the inside of our drum. That's the little PVC shaft cover that sits over the shaft itself just to keep things tidy. It's just a little piece of plastic, and that's the inside. So you can see here, that sits on that lip.